Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for May 26th, 2022. Let me remind you that the best strategic update you can get today would be tuning into the Schiller Institute conference, which begins at 11 a.m. Eastern Time at theschillerinstitute.com. This is a conference which will feature real experts on the strategic crisis and the war danger, including Helga Zepp-LaRouche, Colonel Richard Black, Ray McGovern, and the former chairman of the Italian Air Force, General Tricarico. They'll be discussing what the alternative is to the ongoing war and the policy of NATO and the United States, which is to continue the war until there can be regime change in Russia and then move to a similar situation with China. Now, the reason we have to move to a new strategic architecture is that if we don't take control of policy away from these unipolar extremists, we will end up in World War III, which could be a nuclear war, because these lunatics believe that the U.S. could win a nuclear war. That's what the planning has been, the wargaming has been in the Pentagon and elsewhere, and that's the great danger that faces mankind today. I want to give you a quick report from the battlefront in Ukraine, which shows now that even pro-war Western media are beginning to acknowledge that Russia's special military operation in Donbass is succeeding. The Military Times just issued a report saying that Russia is closing in on cutting off the road connection to Western Ukraine, that the Ukrainian forces are surrounded. Some are defecting, some are leaving the battlefield. They're caught in a pincher's operation. There's also been successful targeting by Russia of depots where the weapons coming in from NATO are being delivered. Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister at Davos, reported yesterday that the situation in Donbass is, quote, extremely bad. His solution, he called for more weapons. Also calling for more weapons delivery was George Soros, the evil nonagenarian, was there to say that a long war is against the interests of everyone. Putin must be finished off immediately. Remember, Soros was instrumental working with American neocons and the Obama-Biden administration to carry out the coup in the Maidan Square in February 2014. Now, while all this is going on, what we're seeing is the beginnings of a political earthquake in Western countries. Just a few examples. A new Reuters poll shows that support for Biden fell 6% in 1 week. 6%, that's pretty significant. A Gallup poll showed that 83% of Americans believe that the United States is headed in the wrong direction. And among Democrats, those who say they're satisfied with the Biden administration fell from 38% in March to 24% today. Now, while these polls are showing the population doesn't want war, doesn't want this $40 billion package, doesn't accept the so-called anti-inflation fight, which is just driving inflation higher, doesn't agree with the Green New Deal, in spite of that, Democrats and Republicans are completely united in the Congress in supporting this war. And this tells you something, that it's the political class funded by the war hawks, funded by the military-industrial complex, by the corporate cartels, by the financial institutions and bankers who are demanding that they be bailed out while you be cast off into the street, that most people don't accept that. And that raises the question of how long are we going to tolerate this kind of terrible leadership? Now, the same thing is going on in Germany, where the majority of the population sees inflation and the supply chain problem, the empty store shelves and so on. You can't find pasta in some of the stores in Germany now. That they're getting increasingly angry, which was reflected in a column by Gabor Steingart, a former editor of the daily business journal Handelsblatt, who wrote that Scholz seems to have his head entirely in Ukraine while the German population is concerned about bread and butter issues. There's been a huge drop in support for Scholz's party, the Social Democrats, which, by the way, he only got 26% in the national election, so it wasn't an overwhelming victory on his part. But they had a significant drop in support in 2 recent state elections. Steingart wrote that besides his focus on Ukraine, Scholz seems to believe that the flood of money policy is good. That is, the European Central Bank, following the policy of the Federal Reserve, is flooding money into the banking system and thinking that this is going to be something that will work. Instead, it's just increasing the rate of inflation, lowering the buying power of the population. Steingart writes that Scholz, as recently as less than a year ago, stated, like many in the United States, that inflation is not a problem. He denied there was a risk of inflation getting out of control. Steingart said that with Scholz, his view is the same as many other officials, that the flood of money policy was right. You don't have to worry about it. It will take care of itself. Well, there's no excuse for citizens of countries, whether it's Germany, the United States, the United Kingdom, or poorer countries that are going along with these policies. There's no excuse for the population to sit by and allow their governments to surrender their power to govern to international bankers and cartels who are interested in only one thing: self-preservation, self-enrichment. The cartels that dictate policy don't care whether you can't afford gasoline, don't care whether you can't pay your medical bills or your house mortgage. They're interested in one thing: their survival. And their survival at this point depends on eliminating any opposition to the flood of money policy and the Great Reset, Green New Deal policies that they've decided is the only way they can survive. Well, why should we be concerned if incompetent speculators have to go out of business and eat their losses? That's the way our system was designed to work. If someone is propping up a quadrillion-dollar derivative market, which has nothing of underlying value under the financial instruments they're buying and selling, they should go into bankruptcy. Instead, what the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank and the Bank of England policy is that they'll be bailed out and that we'll go to war with any country that doesn't accept that system. It's time for that system to be changed. That's why we're holding these conferences on organizing a new financial and strategic architecture. I'm going to link at the bottom of the description page today 2 links. One to the seminar that will begin in a few hours online at the schillerinstitute.com at 11 a.m. Eastern today. And secondly, our petition calling for convening a conference to establish a new security and financial architecture. The world is going rapidly toward hell, but there are solutions and alternatives. Join with us to make sure that those solutions and alternatives become the policies of governments, rather than governments meekly submitting to the demands of the super wealthy and the corporate cartels. Thanks, and I'll see you again tomorrow.